Hi, welcome to Kappa Java Week 7. Today we will be talking about classes. So what is a class? Well, a class is like a blueprint for creating objects, and we can use the keyword class in order to create an object. To create a class. And then when we want to create an object or an instance of a class, we would use the class that we defined. And so to define a class, we would have the class keyword plus the name of the class. And then we can also define properties of the class. So here we would have the object property word, and we can define it to equal hi. And then when we create a class, we would have the variable name equal to the class name and then parentheses. And then we can access the object properties by having the name of the object dot the name of the property. So here we can have a class person. And then we can have the property name. So now when we create an instance of the class, we would do person and then parentheses. And then we can access the name by doing person.name. So now when I run this, it should run Sarah. And then we can create multiple instances of the class. So I can create a second variable, person1 equals person. And when we print out the name, it'll still print out Sarah. But sometimes we might want the object property to have different values. So in this case, we want to use an init function. So all classes have this function, and this function is always executed when instances of the class are created. And so the purpose of this function is to assign values to object properties. So here in this example, you can see here's the init function. And so this function will take in the parameter word, and then we'll set the object property word equal to the value from the parameter. And so here self would just refer to the object being created, while word is the object property. And then so when we have when we create the object of the class, we would have the object name, and inside the parentheses we would want to put in the argument for word. So now when we print out the object property word, it will equal hi, since word here would just equal hi, and then self.word would just equal word, which will equal hi. So we can do that here for name. And then we would need to add a argument, so we can have Sarah and Bob. Now when we run this, this is supposed to be person. Now when we run this, it'll print out Sarah and Bob for the names. And then we can also add more object properties. So here we can add age, and we would have self.age equals age. And so now we would need to add another argument for the value of age. We have 23 and 24. And then so now when we print this, we can also print out the person's age. So now when we run it, it'll print out the name and age for person and person 1. So we can also have, classes also have the string function, and so this defines what is returned when an instance of the class is represented as a string. And if this value function is not set, then the string representation of the object is returned. So here you can see here's the string function, and so it'll just return the value of the object property word plus the value of the object property letter. And so when we print phrase, the object phrase, it'll print out hi plus a. So first we can see what would happen if we don't have the string function set. So when we print person right now, it'll print out this as the string representation, and this isn't very useful, which is why we want to define a string function. So now when we run this, it'll print out CR23. And we can have this string function return anything we want. So we could, instead of having it that, we could have name plus and then age. So now when we run it, it'll print out name Sarah, age 23, and we could also print out person 1, and it'll have like the same format except with different values for the name and age. And so classes can also have methods, and these are just functions that belong to the object. So here, word print would be a method, and so to create this function, we would have def, the name of the function, which would be word print, and then parentheses self, and then what we want the function to do, which for word print would be print out the value of the object parameter property self, object property word. And so to call this function, we would just have the object name dot the function name. So here we can do that. We can create a method introduce. So then I can call this function by doing person dot introduce. When I run this, it'll do print out how many zero. During printing, I could also have it return a value if like I need to use it for later. And so now when I run it, it won't print out anything. This person dot introduce would just have the value of this, and so we can store it in a variable. And so storing in a variable will just let us use it again later without having to call the function again. So here now when I run this, it'll print out intro, which would equal this. And so you can also create multiple functions for a class. So then we have the self parameter, and so the self parameter refers to the current instance of the class and is used to access variables of the class. So we already saw this parameter earlier for the init method function, the string function, and the introduce method. So here self is always the first parameter, and that is always the case for any function of the class. And so But this parameter doesn't necessarily need to be called self, but it has to be the first parameter. So now we can also change properties of objects. So we can modify a property by setting the property equal to a different value. So here, phrase.word equal by would set the property word of the object phrase equal to by. We can also delete a property using the del keyword. So del phrase.word would just delete the object property from word from phrase. So here we could do that. We could change the age. So now when we run this, it'll output 23 and then 24, and so now the value is 24. We can also delete the property. So now when I run this would give me an error here because since we deleted the property age from person, we can it's no longer defined. So that would give an error. But when we have this, it the person 1 would still have the property age since we only delete it for person. So the del and then the object the property would only delete the object property for that object, but not for every instance of the class. And so we can also delete objects and use a pass statement when creating a class. So we could, to delete objects, we also would use the del keyword, and we just have del and then the object. And then we can also use pass in order to have an empty class definition without getting an error. So we just have the class name, and then pass. So here we can delete person. And then so now when we run this will give us an error down here since person is now deleted. So when we try to do person.introduce, we can't since there is no person. And then we can also create empty class. So for example, we could have class something. And if we try to run it like this will give us an error because the code expects something inside the class definition, but there is nothing. So to prevent an error, we can have pass. And now this will run without giving us an error. So now we want to do a project. So for our project, we want to create a zoo catalog of animals. And so we would want to define a variety of animal classes, and each animal class should have different properties like the name, location of the zoo, etc. And we would also want to create methods for each of these classes. So we could have different methods, and then we would also want to create instances of the class to represent the individual animals in the zoo, and then we would also want to create functions that will provide the user with information about the animals in the zoo. For example, we could have a function that displays the names of a specific type of animal. And so that's it for today. Thank you for listening.